Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SocialFlight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have such a wonderful show for you this evening. Emmy-award-winning aviation filmmakers Adam and Kara White are here. And that little intro that you just saw is just a tiny, tiny peek and taste of some of the just truly wonderful work that that duo has done. Before we get started, just a few things. First of all, SocialFlight's Fly to Win Challenge is in full swing right now. We are giving away a Lightspeed Delta Zulu headset on December 1st. So be sure to get in there to win. All you need to do is check in, get the SocialFlight mobile app, or go to socialflight.com. You need the mobile app in order to check in at your local airport, or when you're flying at multiple airports. All it takes is going and doing that, and then you're there. You've got the chance to win that Lightspeed Delta Zulu headset. In addition to that, if you do a bunch of flying and rack up some points, you can be on our leaderboard and get multiple entries. It's all free, and we are just here to support General Aviation. In addition to that, tonight's broadcast is brought to us by Aspen Avionics and the amazing Evolution 1000 flight displays. We use them in our Bonanza. We just added a second one to have both the primary flight display and a multifunction display next to it. And I can tell you, especially on cross-country trips, it's absolutely fantastic. I just love flying with that, and we're building it into our Mustang build, which is going on right behind me here. And the best news for all of you is that until December 22nd, 2023, you've just got this period of time. They have an enormous discount program going on, fantastic promotion, 50% off of feature unlocks, 50% off of remanufactured legacy units, and just tons of other things. Go to Aspen Avionics and check all that out and see how it can help you. In a time when prices are going up on seemingly everything, getting any company to come out with a great discount program is just wonderful. Now to tonight's guests. Adam and Kara White are the collaborative team behind Hemlock Films, and together they produce some of the most amazing aviation and space exploration documentaries celebrating the past while inspiring future generations. Adam is an Emmy-award-winning filmmaker and cinematographer who's worked on big-budget Hollywood films, TV shows, award-winning documentaries, and commercials. Adam is also a licensed pilot. Kara is a producer, director, and writer with a slew of Emmy Awards and nominations for her wonderful and compelling documentaries. Together, the duo have been the creative force behind the Emmy Award-winning series The Restorers, as well as the spectacular Emmy Award-winning Space Chase USA, as well as Red Tail Reborn, Rise Above WASP, Beyond the Powder, and Resistance, among many other projects. I'm thrilled to have them both with us here tonight. And let me bring them on the line now. Please help me welcome to SocialFlight Live, Adam and Kara White. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing well. How are you doing today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here.
Oh, we're pleased to be with you.
We're just making sure we have all the technology done correctly.
Oh, yeah. It's all good. We can hear you. We can see you.
Okay, great.
So I'd like to know, before we even get into the films, how did this all start? Tell me a little bit about your background, how you found each other as a team, and what brought you into Hemlock Films and what we now know.
You want to go first?
Well, both of us worked in the film industry before we got into aviation. And early in my career, I won't say how early, I wanted to do something with aviation, and a good inroad for that seemed to be through documentaries. And I had gone to the Cleveland Air Show ever since I was a little kid, and it was kind of always the jet teams and baking on a hot ramp somewhere, and I just hated it. And then I went through college and got into the film industry, and then was able to go to different types of air shows, like the one they had in Batavia, where there is no hot ramp. You're just kind of allowed to see the aircraft and meet the people that are associated with it, and that kind of got me juiced up that there was something more here. I didn't have a clue how much more was there. And then thought naively, like, oh, I'll just do a little movie about these small amount of people that do warbird and vintage aircraft restoration, not understanding the enormity of the community that was involved. And every time I did a story for the restorers, which started with Beck and Odegaard up in North Dakota, every time I would see somebody, I didn't even know who Jerry Beck was. But then I talked to Bob Odegaard, and he's like, you know who you should talk to? And then I suddenly meet Jerry Beck and the entire shop that he had, and did that as a story. And everything that we've done, even today, always is somebody sort of bringing that kind of story to us. And that's kind of how I got off and running.
Yeah, that started Hemlock in 1999, and then I didn't come into it until 2009. And when we met, he was really kicking around the idea of doing more restorers, more as a TV series. So that was our first project together. And then from there, we're off and running and have gone down the rabbit hole, as you've seen, of all the projects we've done. And it's very cool. Like, I guess I don't realize how much we've done until we put it all together. And just even watching that clip at the beginning of this, I was like, oh, yeah. I love those. Those are so good. It makes me want to rewatch our stuff. So
the experience of doing all of them as well. It's always the case, even if we're not working on airplane stuff. People say, how can you watch the movies that you worked on? It's like, it always seems like a travel log video of our summer. But doing the airplane stuff, it does, but even more so and more rewarding. Yeah. When we get to watch that back. But yeah, it's a beloved subject. So when we watch it back, going, oh, that's really great to do that stuff. When do we get to leave again to go do that?
Tell me a little bit about the restore, because that's really what kicked everything off. And I think some people may be a little bit confused that there's multiple restorers,
yeah,
right? Not just
originally, I decided to do a documentary and made it a 1-hour documentary for PBS called The Restorers, just one movie with 8 different stories in it. And I was, and I still do this, but I wanted to release it on an anniversary. So I wanted to release it in 2003 on the 100th anniversary of Powered Flight. So I spent all of 2002 doing those stories, and at a certain point I just had to stop shooting because it kept going, you should talk to, and they're really great stories from people doing Corsairs and Mustangs and astronauts and Reno air races and all that, and at a certain point I just had to stop and put the kibosh on it and call it done. And then it went on to PBS. And then, yeah, it cut to close to a decade later, and that's when, and I always knew that it should be a series, just having tasted how large the community was, and that's when we started talking about it. And again, we're never ready to go, we just go. And somebody said, hey, by the way, there's this big reunion at the Air Force Museum, which is 3 hours down the road from us, with the Doolittle Raiders, and we're going to fly a whole bunch of B-25s in here. And we're like, I guess we're ready. We're
like, get our credit cards out.
Yeah, we don't have a dime in place. I guess we're doing the show now.
Yeah. And it's won Emmy.
It's one of the biggest projects we did for doing a B-25 launch of 17 B-25s, flying from Urbana and going over to the Air Force Museum. And like you said, get the credit cards out. I hope somebody cares. And we had 3 camera teams. We had one in Urbana with a camera crane and all that, filming the takeoff. I was on board one of the B-25s, and Kara was at the Air Force Museum to catch. And we land, we all taxi up smartly, shut all the engines off in a row, pop open the hatch, and I look, and there isn't a single soul there. And I was like, crap, well, you spent a whole bunch of money and nobody cares about this subject. And then they opened the gates, and 70,000 people came out to see those planes and the Doolittle Raiders over the course of a weekend. And it it was a big brow wipe at that point that we're not just wasting our time, and people love it, and that got on PBS, and we ended up winning an Emmy for that episode.
Yeah,
so.
and I was invited to my high school for Veterans Day
Yeah.
to speak, and I was like, I should not be the one speaking. But we played that episode, and all the veterans, Vietnam veterans, no matter what war they were in, they were like, thank you for telling this story. So I think not only was it because it's specifically
Just
about
dipping into it.
Yeah, the World War II veterans and the Doolittle Raiders, but it kind of speaks bounds for all the veterans out there. But that was,
Yeah, that's an image from it.
yeah, so that's part of the series. The series is a 5 1-hour episodes. And is it still airing on PBS?
I'm trying to remember.
I know, I can't remember when the contract runs out. But it also is available on Amazon and Vimeo.
And DVD.
And DVD, well, on DVD and Amazon. But
it's a really, really wonderful series. I love it, especially the one you were just talking about. That and you put such a human take on it. It's not just about, of course, the aircraft. It's about the people behind it and the mentality of it and the culture of that goes into all of that.
Yeah.
It's almost never about the hardware, because we're long since gone. We're down the road from being involved in those aircraft. And those aircraft, quite frankly, were made to last 18 months before they're supplanted by whatever next was coming down the road. The Wright brothers were famously never looked back, that they just crumpled up whatever they just made for whatever the next thing was. But we find it as a great tool telling the story about modern mechanics and pilots right now and why they do it. And it's a great excuse then to dip into history. So, oh, you're going to talk about a museum in Minnesota that has a B-25? This is our excuse to also talk about the Doolittle Raiders and sort of crowbar open history in a way, because we always want to have a modern motion component. We don't just want to have archival pictures and footage thrown on the screen. So if there's somebody that's flying something nowadays, that's a good excuse to tell a story.
Yeah, and I think it helps too with that. It gives the story its heart. And that's one thing the guiding force of everything we do is a line from a film that I love. And it's like, what keeps it in the air? Love. So we try to take that into account on everything we write.
Including the movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that's so wonderful in the films of yours that I have watched is it really is a blend of everything. It's a blend of seeing almost Ken Burns style of footage when you're looking at photos and getting into the history there. It's the live people now who are dealing with things, and then in many cases it's reenactments that go along with it. It's everything wrapped together to bring you into that. And one of the biggest ones, of course, for that is Rise Above WASP. Talk to me a little bit about that, and I'll put up an image of it. But tell me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so that was my baby. That was one that the CAF hired us to make this. It's part of their traveling exhibit. I'm sure many of you have seen it if it's gone to many air shows, including Oshkosh every year. But the WASP have always been the coolest to me. I remember seeing a photo of them when I was like 18, and I'm like, wait, what is this?
Yeah, who's that?
And like since then, I've just been in love with them. So this was like definitely a passion project for me. And I always say, I'm like, even if I don't get to do anything else, this is the thing that like this is it. I'm pleased as much that we were able to make this.
And the image that you have up there right now, when we were doing the initial scouting, a lot of Texas doesn't look like it did back in the 40s. So some of the imagery that we were trying to recreate are from some very famous photographs that were taken either by the Air Corps or by Life magazine, and this was one of them. This is actually on the field at Sweetwater, Texas, at Avenger Field. And that is a WASP, an actual T6 that the WASP used to fly back at Sweetwater in the 40s with Ms. Stance, female pilot flying over it. And she flew so low, she would shake the crane.
Yeah, a lot of our footage is like wobbly at the front.
So we had to image stabilize it later.
But we had our production designer redesign the sign for us, and all of the majority of Rise Above WASP's reenactment scenes are filmed in Sweetwater, Texas, which was absolutely, I don't even know how to describe
it's
how
holy.
amazing
It's holy land.
you could feel it when you're there, and it was hot. It was everything the WASP described in our interviews that we did with them, because how we started the whole project is
that's Schutze Reynolds there that you had up there, and then these are the actresses that are depicting.
We'll go back to Schutze Reynolds. You know, that holds a very dear place in my heart. We've had so many amazing female pilots that have broken barriers on the show, all of whom trace everything back to the WASP, all of whom give credit to the WASP for the achievements that they've done in their lives. So it really is quite wonderful.
Yeah, and it's like they're so inspiring even for people who aren't into aviation. Like it's all about their attitude and the fact that they were like, oh, you're gonna tell me I can't do something? I'm gonna show you how good I can do it. And I've always loved their story, and I think it, like I said, I think it just transcends even just flying in airplanes. I think it's good for everyone to know their story. And the one thing that I really wanted for this to come out of this project was to show the world what strong, brave leaders women can be, including, because they're always like, oh, young girls can see it, but I'm like, young boys need to see it.
Young boys should see it too.
So it's like I said, it's my favorite thing we've ever made, and this is our reenactments of the B-29, which we did in Dallas, and we just pulled the front of it into the hangar, and then green screened all of it, so that way we could make it look like they were flying, because there was no way to cheat. Normally we don't do that. We want to use the real.
We had actors that had to do lines, and the B-29 Fifi takes thousands and thousands of dollars to even get it up in the air. So that was not really.
Yeah, there really wasn't even a way to fake it, because the pilots are men who are flying it right now. So at the time we were doing it. So I was like, I don't even know how to fake this.
You had to do a little bit of Hollywood trickery, but
but it turned out pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. For anyone who has the opportunity to see it where it's traveling, it really is quite fantastic. Tell me a little bit about the process when you're dealing with the acting side of it, because you have a documentary approach, and that seems to be where most of your focus is, but there's so much in this particular story and in some of the others that really is recreating and very much about acting.
Yeah. Well, Adam and I both went to film school, and we work on movies that come through town or used to travel and do it.
There we are.
Yeah.
There we are getting sunburned.
But that's where our passion lies, where we would, if we had the money, we would just do narratives. But because we don't, like I said, when we're putting on our own credit cards, it's easier to tell the stories when they're documentary.
You can do it more economically, and by economically, even just with speed. But narrative grabs the viewer. It's like it's the Apollo 13 effect. That we all watched documentaries about the Apollo program when we were in high school and junior high, but until Tom Hanks made a movie about it, it didn't really stick. So once he was able to do that, then now it's an emotion-centered story with people at the center. On a very difficult movie. Apollo 13 is a very difficult movie technically to be able to convey that information, have people care. But to do it in a narrative way gets your emotions running and connects you with the WASP that a straight doc wouldn't have done.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, like I say, we do docs because we don't have any money. I mean, I do love doing documentaries.
And Rise Above WASP was very expensive.
And Rise Above, yes, that did cost a coin or two.
Yeah.
But I love telling the stories of real people and not having that tainted by having to change it with narrative, because we've definitely run into that as well.
And so much of this you did not. It just as it is. And the very first job number one when we did Rise Above WASP was travel around the country and interview every WASP we could get our hands on, the real WASP, so we can, one, include them in the documentary, which they are in it, and two, so Kara could write the script based on the words right from the pilot's mouth.
Yeah, that was the biggest challenge, I think, trying to sum up them as a group when each of them are so different individually. But yeah, we use that to be able to craft the narrative scenes, kind of helped guide what those could be. And then directing, we had our gals who are, a couple of them are actually really big anime voiceover artists. So they were excited. They're like, oh, this is weird to be on screen when we were filming with them. But most of the direction.
You're talking about the actors in that.
Yeah, our actresses. Yeah. And then, yeah, so like we all sat down together before we started, and I sent them, I had them watch a documentary about the WASP that wasn't ours. And they, like they did their own research, and a lot of it was just really easy. Once you get them knowing those women and their stories, they're like, I got it. You go through the scene and then you're like, and remember, you're also women doing this. And they're like, yeah, got it.
So in this scene, pretend you've been marginalized throughout your life, and they all went, okay. I know that one.
Yep. So it was, that part was fairly easy for me.
How, I mean, there's so many facets once you open the door to something like that with actresses and everybody working all together. You've got, it's a period piece, right? So you've got, lighting, hair, makeup, sets, costume design. It's just mind-blowing to me that the two of you are able to pull that off on such a quick time frame and tight budget.
Yeah.
And there were 140 digital visual effect shots in Rise Above WASP, and the original Jurassic Park had 40.
A lot of it was erasing stuff.
Erasing like cell towers, and but we also had to we politely asked the commemorative Air Force if we could sandblast the nose art off of Fifi, and rightfully so, they said no. So we had to we digitally replaced the nose art, so it was the same nose art of Lady Bird that's the WASP, the B-29 that the WASP flew. So on top of other things, just doing cleanup and slight adjustments, we had to do some fairly major digital work onto the B-29 just to keep it historically accurate.
Yeah,
as much as we could.
And we were very lucky that there were, for our extras at the WASP at Avenger Field, are all volunteers that brought themselves in. A lot of them are granddaughters of the WASP, or pilots, and they just wanted to be a part of telling their story. Because I was like, oh boy, there's a lot of them, and I can't feature everybody. And they're like, I don't care, I just want to be here. And they all got dressed up by our wardrobe, which the Liberty Aviation Museum here in Ohio was very wonderful and let us borrow a ton of
parachutes, which
we had
it's like trying to find a unicorn to get a period parachute.
Yeah,
still packed.
Yeah, and all the coveralls, because they had bought a bunch of repros of things, and they were like, oh yeah, like go ahead and take it. So we had a bunch of stuff we could choose from.
If you're ever in Northern Ohio, go check out Liberty.
Their
plus they got a great diner.
Is really great.
And then our costume person was Amy Loria out of the Minnesota wing of the CAF, and she doesn't do costumes per se in motion pictures professionally, but she was able to bring historical accuracy, which is what we wanted.
Yeah, because she does a lot, or she used to do a lot of reenactments. So she was in with that community and was able to make sure we were doing everything correctly. So it was really this wonderful, like, aviation community effort to try and bring this story to life on the budget that we had. Everybody
pushed hard for it. The road that you showed, with the archway, the real archway road doesn't exist anymore. There's a building there, but the road that we ended up using was the path was the dirt driveway to the Sweetwater Gun Club, and we blocked it. We asked if we could block this.
It was like a Sunday morning.
Sunday morning, which, you know, breakfast, church, and a firing range in some order always happens there. And they said, you have until dawn, until noon to film on that road. And I was last man off. We finished, and I think it was 12:05 that I was off, and there was a line of people waiting to do some target practice. And the head of the club stuck his hand inside my van and shook my hand and said, and I apologize, I'm sorry we're 5 minutes late. And he said, I appreciate what you guys are doing. I was in the Army, and if it wasn't for these WASP gals, I would never have met my wife, because she flew in the Army, and she wouldn't have done that if it weren't for them.
Wow.
And all of Sweetwater, which it has oil and gas industry around it. But if they could, they'd bring us a pallet of water. They would bring us ladders. However,
they could help us.
They could, because they're so behind trying to get the story out. And that happens to us everywhere, regardless of whatever the story is. But for Rise Above WASP, there was a little bit more oomph behind it when it came to esprit de corps.
Yeah, and when we were out there filming, our crew that we brought with us from Ohio, because we couldn't get crew in Sweetwater, Texas, including people who have worked on Oscar-winning films, just were dying at this part, because the plane, we had Laura Stantz going over in the
T6.
The T6, doing a wagon wheel for us with Adam on the walkie talking to her. And then further out, which sadly it doesn't come across that great, but there is a wagon wheel of other World War II trainers going.
There's a lot of planes in the air.
There's a lot happening. And the professional film crew who have seen a ton of really cool
They worked
stuff,
on the Avengers.
They were like losing their minds how cool it was. They're like, this is amazing.
One or two of them got flights.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we are still filming, and like one of our arts department guys.
We did not.
No, goes taxiing by in the back of a T6, and we're like, what? We're working. What are you doing?
Hey, we're still on the clock.
No, somebody offered to play for me, and I'm like, oh boy. But it was
Tell
cool
me a little bit about how you do some of the filming that requires airborne photography.
Most of
itself
yeah,
is
most
all consuming.
well, most of the time the math is to film a warbird, you need another warbird. For flight characteristics, speed, all of that. So the image you have up here is from when we did Rise Above, the original, about 10 years ago, about the Tuskegee Airmen. We're over the Mississippi River up in Minnesota. And we filmed from Miss Mitchell, the Minnesota's B-25. And most of the time we push hard to be able to shoot without glass, because you'll see it, and it kind of negates the imagery. And then we are shooting, in this particular case, we only shot 5K. As reference, your televisions at home are usually 4K, so this is this is a little bit better, and now we shoot 8K to help with some image stabilization. And most of the time, it is just a camera in my arms the whole time filming it. And if you want it more stable, that's
that's before he got strapped in.
Hanging out the back of a devil dog. With the glass removed, and that was for filming the B-29. And if you want it stable and good looking, you just get closer, and that's pretty much it. It's very simple, but it's also you have very, very good pilots in the air with very pricey hardware. So there's not too much magic when it goes into it. Just and while I'm shooting, Kara's in the back making sure with a list that I'm getting all the shots that I need. And then I also have an assistant that has a focus control motor to make, because I'm task saturated to make this thing look good. So she's making sure that I'm sharp and in focus all the time.
Yeah, and when we were filming in that image of the Red Tail Mustang in the beach, Miss Mitchell was our camera ship.
Yeah.
And Adam and I and our camera assistant, Amy Faust, were in there doing like gymnastics while you're there, because the bomb bay has that little gap that you slide through.
To go over the bomb bay. So yeah, we filmed
the tunnel.
looking out the back and filmed the Mustang looking out the back. And then we said, all right, position number 2. And the Mustang peeled off to go into the front and then was in the lead position. And I go over the bomb bay, pulling myself across with those bars that are on the top and go, throw it. And Amy, my assistant, takes the red camera and slides it across the bomb bay, which then I catch, crawl down into the bomb bay, or crawl down into the nose, and where the Mustang is set up, just waiting for me to hurry up and get the shot, and open the port, and now hundreds of mile-an-hour wind is coming through that port. Now I got to shoot through that to get the shot that you had just shown. So. And a lot of the time, and we're very cognizant of the fact that we are doing things that are on thousands of people's bucket lists, and we enjoy it a little bit, but at the same time, we hear those gas gauges going at $10, $20, $30, $40. So we're working hard to get what we need so those planes can get on the ground.
Yeah. That's it shows certainly through that. One of the other things that's obviously a common thread throughout so many of your films is archival footage. Where does that come from? When anytime that people are watching a documentary and seeing all these flashbacks to archival real footage, where's that come from?
Trade secret. It comes from a myriad of places. Literally the Air Force. Sometimes, particularly for some of the space stuff that we have done, I've gone to the National Archives and threaded up film and ran it through the projector, and then had it transferred. And then other times it has come right from the pilots themselves, particularly for Rise Above WASP. Kara worked with them, and we did copying from a lot of the WASP themselves, that they took pictures while they were there.
Yeah, they had some really great photographs, including, what's her name? Which one had color photos?
Oh, Lynn.
Okay.
I apologize.
I know. Yeah, this shows how I'm getting old. But she had did color film, so we had a whole bunch of color photos to pick from that.
Yeah, that was good.
But yeah, for footage, it's just we do a lot of research and scouring internet and seeing who has them. A lot of universities have things. Like,
in some places, like when I did Red Tail Reborn, Maxwell Air Force Base was the repository for all of their stuff. So I just come in with a scanner and a laptop and a hard drive and have a day of it, and just start copying my little fanny off at as high a resolution as I can. And then we always have that. Now we have an enormous repository of materials from all these stories that we've done.
Yeah, a lot of it we're able to find through our historians that we interview, because they'll be like, oh, like so-and-so has this collection, or
a lot of universities will have it.
Yeah, like the 1929 women's air race that's shown a lot in the Beyond the Powder. That came from University of South Carolina. Somehow got the RKO footage.
Inexplicably.
Yeah.
And then the women's air race started in Santa Monica and landed in Cleveland, and it was a huge media event. So Cleveland Library here had a fair amount, and we were able to kind of go and take a look at those. And then I was like, let's call the LA Times. It took place right in their doorstep, and called them up, and we were bracing ourselves for a big giant bill, because if you use like CBS or any other media, it can get pricey. And LA Times is like, give us credit. That's all we need.
They have stunning photos.
Stunning work that they did at the start mark for the Santa Monica start. So you don't know. You just ask. And sometimes it's you'll get material that was just shot by 19-year-olds because they were there, and sometimes you'll get stuff that's shot by an Oscar winner.
Yeah, and Western Reserve here in Cleveland also had their historical society had a ton of air race film from all the different years that I mean, Cleveland was racing from
the center of the world.
the 20s to the 50s, but their stuff was really cool too, and that was nice. They allowed us to use that for free as well. So,
well, when you think about our archival footage and you think about some of the other things, the film that comes to mind right now is Space Chase USA. And to anyone who hasn't seen this, the story of Cocoa Beach, the story of the space program, and what happened in Florida, and focusing on that is really, really amazing. And it includes a ton of archival footage. Tell me the story about making that.
It was, we were approached because it was the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and Orlando PBS wanted us to make something about that and have it be regional, but also have a national appeal. So we had 1 hour to talk about the space race, which is not a lot of time. And then fortunately, NASA shoots everything. Unfortunately, they don't keep it. So you have to go digging for, they have it at the National Archives and they have it at the Library of Congress. So sometimes you have to go kind of deep to find the materials that they themselves don't hold on to sometimes very well. And then proceed from there. And Space Chase I didn't keep it just about Apollo, but it was about Kennedy, Apollo, through shuttle, through now.
Starts with Sputnik. I mean, it goes all the way from Sputnik through the entire program. And I was really blown away how it takes you into the community, that you had footage from what it was like at different periods of time, driving down Main Street, Cocoa Beach, or seeing some of the things happening there. It's remarkable, and definitely makes you wonder, like, how in the world did you find that?
Well, just legitimately, I called up the Cocoa Beach Chamber of Commerce, and fortunately they had somebody that had, and it's almost always disorganized, but they had some boxes of some of that material to show the changes that happened to a sleepy little beach town that had a 1,000% population increase in 10 years. It was the divorce capital of the world. It was the capital of everything of the world for 10 years in doing that. And that was part of the project, was to be able to talk about that, not just at those 60s moments there, but let's talk about 1974, when Apollo is over and everybody's got to give their house away. And then let's talk about when the shuttle program stopped, and it's kind of the same thing. And then we went down there and filmed, because now they're experiencing another boon because of the multiple companies that are launching there for. So yeah, you just start knocking on doors, like, hey, were you here? Yeah. You have some pictures. Let's see them.
Yeah, and we were able to talk to a couple of the engineers from the
Apollo engineers.
Oh my gosh, those were wonderfully interesting interviews, and we only were with them for maybe an hour or so, and you get done asking the questions that we needed for the program. And
I'll talk for 8 more hours.
You guys want to go to the bar and chat? Because this is really interesting. I have a million questions.
The astronauts are cool, when they walk up and whip off the mirrored glasses and say, I'm Al Warden. It's like, of course you are. But then to talk about the women and men that had their mitts on those F1 and J1 engines on the Saturn V rocket, and conveyed to you on camera, if we don't do our job, if we take too many days off, guys die. And that was their overriding concern for a decade. So it's no wonder that sometimes families didn't survive, but that was the dedication that they had, because it's not our tires are going to be poorly made, or we're going to miss a deadline. It's like there's 3 dudes on the nose of that rocket that we owe everything we can to. And interviewing the engineers those were great days.
Yeah, and it was a time of national priority.
Absolutely.
And coming together to achieve something there. Your film, Space Chase USA, I think was probably the first documentary I've seen that started to shine a light on what it was as a country, not just the astronauts themselves. And what's interesting is we've heard that we had Burt Rutan on the show, Dick Rutan was on the show. The interesting things that get said almost in passing are, well, he had said, I didn't want to work for Apollo, and that was what everyone in the United States was doing at the time. So I did this, and it really brought that idea, like, yeah, everyone in the country was working on Apollo.
Yeah.
Like, that's not something easy to relate to in today's world.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, you dig into things like that, and it's. You catch opinions from a lot of different angles, but some of them were, it was the greatest public works project that Washington's ever cooked up. That some of it was, some people will say it was national pride and it was us against the Russians and all that, but it was a really great way to push science and technology forward and have a public works employment project that had good STEM at its core. And we made an entire generation of engineers from within the span of like 6 years.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing. Engineers and technicians and mathematicians and physicists and everything, that it was a national movement. And again, that is really something I think that's well encapsulated in Space Chase USA.
Available on pbs.org.
It's
it's still on there.
The PBS app, it's free. You can just go on there and click on it.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, I think it's there. I think it's also directly on the web at PBS. So as we get to the end, we'll certainly talk about making sure people understand, where those different things are. Talk to me about your most recent effort, Why I Fly.
Why I Fly is a web series to highlight people who are involved in aviation. That's it. And it could be a 19-year-old that just got her license, or it could be a mechanic for Boeing. It could be a flight director for the ISS, and everything in between. The purpose of the program is in part to help with the GA problem, to be able to show that aviation and aerospace is not just somebody that looks like me flying for an airline. That the aerospace and aviation have a big, wide footprint, and there's a lot of places that people can find themselves. And again, just like the restorers, most of our stories came from people giving us suggestions, like, oh, here's this woman and she runs a squadron for the Navy. Oh, here's this guy, he flies the helicopter on Mars. And then you just start. You just say, all right, well, let me get the phone book out and call a Jet Propulsion Laboratory and figure out how we can go in there and film.
Yeah.
Some of them were easy, some of them took us a while.
And that was something this is Adam's passion project. He's been thinking about it for a while, and he was pitching it to people, and we did a number of them on our own just to kind of have that sample, so that people, when we went to funders, we'd be like, this is kind of what the project is. And the National Aviation Hall of Fame got a grant from the state of Ohio for education, and they ended up funding 24 of those for us. So, which was great because it allowed us to go all over the country and be able to interview a multitude of different types of people. So, and that part of that program is I can't remember how many schools across Ohio it goes into, but it's all middle schools, and they sent out aviation curriculums to all the teachers so that they can choose to teach aviation, and then these are part of that this is the inspirational part, to show to kids and be like, oh, here you can totally be
there are options,
be a welder or a mechanic or
just do it for fun,
it's just to throw a bunch of stuff out there and see them to scroll through and be like, oh, that looks interesting, like I'll click on that one.
Yeah.
But they're like 3 to 4 minute videos, they're like, I think they're very similar to the Restorer stories, except for they're not
Restorers
necessarily
bites now.
Restorer characters.
And we did the first 24, and it would bring smiles to our faces if somebody decided like we're game for funding season 2.
Yeah, that's where we're at right now. It's trying to find somebody to sponsor more of them.
So for everybody out there, if you know anybody in your circle, or if you personally are in a position to it, sponsor the next season of Why I Fly. Go check it out at Hemlock Films. It is amazing, and I love that there are such a variety from people who are just personalities in aviation, or people who are instructors. Certainly, I recently saw the one of someone who's on the Artemis simulator, person who runs the Artemis simulator. Just amazing different backgrounds.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And like, I think that was interviewing her was great. And like, she mentioned that her and her family watched the Apollo or the moon landing together. And then after we're done, she's like, I've seen these, so I know you need photos, and like pulls up on her phone and she's like, here's a picture of me as a kid watching
Neil come down the ladder.
And I'm like, who are you? I never get this from my interview.
Give me that.
I was like,
exactly
oh my gosh.
But yeah, you have people that are working big swings. You know, she's doing the simulator of our brand new spaceship.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk to the following week would be someone who is an aviation storyteller. Chris Henry up is with the EAA. That wasn't the following week, but and then
Chris Henry, he's been here on the show.
Yeah,
Chris is great.
Very good.
And we have a couple more that are still coming out, which is about the Super Guppy, the crew that flies that for NASA, and then the seaplane base at AirVenture, which even people that go to AirVenture haven't even seen the seaplane base. So
yeah, I mean, we've been there for almost a decade, or I'd been there for almost a decade, and we just finally went out there.
However, the canvas and the conversation can get bigger. That's all the better for it.
Wow. Tell me or obviously we're running a little bit short, but tell me about Red Tail Reborn, because obviously the Tuskegee Airmen are such an important part of our history.
Sure. When I was finishing the Restorers, the very first one, this is back in, let's say, 03 or so, that the people that I was associated with were a lot of the Mustang rebuilders through Jerry Beck's shop and Bob Odegaard's shop up in Fargo. And I know it's not exactly in Fargo, so don't want everybody right away. And by virtue of that, again, it was like, hey, you know, we're redoing this Mustang and it's this, and I start hearing the story of what the CAF did with that Mustang to tell the story the first time with Don Hines. And then they had the accident and they lost Don Hines and they were rebuilding. And so it was literally rebuilding the Red Tail Reborn. And telling that story, and again, like what I had mentioned, that we like a modern component to be able to tell these archival stories. And at that point, they hadn't even, you know, it was years away from Red Tails being made or being made by George Lucas. So, however, the more story of the Tuskegee Airmen could get done, all the better. So then I pitched it. Parker Hannafin was gracious enough to underwrite the budget for it, and I followed the rebuild of the Mustang, went to Tuskegee, Alabama, and then interviewed a bunch of the airmen. I was able to get their stories while they were still around and kicking. So, and PBS loved the idea and said, the second you're done with this, we're putting it on the air. So that's kind of the road for it.
And you got Michael Dorn from Star Trek.
And got Michael Dorn, who played Worf on Star Trek. Not only is Michael Dorn and played Worf on Star Trek and has an amazing voice, but he is also a Warbird pilot. So he is clearly a Kool-Aid drinker to want to do something to help support getting the story out.
Yeah.
And we owe a lot to him for doing that.
Yeah. And then you cut to, and we did Rise Above Tuskegee Airmen, which was over a decade ago. And we're recording with Michael Dorn again, and then he does his.
Oh, he gave us a little Klingon in the recording studio. He gave us some pearls of wisdom, Worf style, which if he ever calls me, that's his ringtone.
That's amazing. Well, so not all of your films and productions that you do, of course, are aviation based, although we can say there's still a parachute in something that is one of my favorite, and that's your short film, which is available on your website, The Resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. So that
Tell me
is
about the story, because I have to say there are some times that you watch something that you cannot unwatch, that it sticks with you. And The Resistance is something that that very, very much is top of mind for me.
yeah, it's our latest, one of our latest projects, and it's a narrative short, and it's about the women spies from World War II, and it's just this 14-minute of
SOE in Paris,
SOE
in France.
occupied France, in a cafe, and there's a Nazi who is a regular in there, and the new SOE agent shows up, and it becomes this kind of cat and mouse with the two of them. And it's a project that is Tri-C Cuyahoga Community College, which is here in Cleveland, has a film intensive program. It's a 6-week course that people can take to learn how to make a movie. And Adam has been teaching it for
6 years or so.
Yeah, several years. And
there's an image of it.
Last year, 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
Yeah.
This was, and they ask a director every year to write a story and come direct and teach the class. And it was Kara's honor this time to be selected, and she wrote this movie to take place.
And it's because Tri-C asked, they're like, okay, like give us 3 ideas of something that you would want to do, and this was one of them. And luckily this is the one they picked. But I was reading a lot of books about the women who were over there being a spy, including a book called D-Day Girls, which I highly recommend. One about Nancy Wake, Virginia Hall, just super fascinating people. And I was like, oh man, nobody really, or at least, here in the States, we don't really see those stories of the resistance. I think it's a little more popular in Europe. But I was like, oh, we have to tell the story of these people who are just the normal people who are living their lives in occupied France. And it's, to me, anybody at that time, it's like a horror movie. Like there's no escaping and there's no hiding. Or you're trying
Your
to
villain
hide.
is in plain sight.
It's very difficult. And it's very intense. So like that's kind of the feel we went with this, is like it just builds to this very tense moment that explodes at the end. But it was something that we decided that we wanted to design as a Western.
Yeah.
So
Nazi movie that's a Western.
yeah, a Western that's not.
You can see it for free on the website. You'll see that it plays in it very easily. It's a Western. It's not a forced idea.
No. And because instead of like the duel at the end of them standing in the middle of the street with their gunfight, it is they are sitting across from a table from each other. But that just came out of with Adam being the director of photography and directors. One of the first processes that you do is you go, okay, what do we want it to look like? And he came up with some images from Wyatt Earp and Unforgiven.
Yeah.
And they're very dark and moody. And I was like, oh, I love this. Because I was like, I kind of want it to feel like a Caravaggio painting, where it's very, very dark and shadowy. And
even though it's broad daylight, there's dark corners everywhere.
Which plays a little bit more in the summer.
Which looks like a Western cafe.
Yeah.
There's one big light source, and that's the door.
Yeah. So once we got that in place, I was like, oh man, I have an idea. I was like, we should totally model this like a Western. So a lot of the shots in there are the same, including down to the black hat, white scarf, because she's wearing a white scarf when she walks into the cafe. But it's one of the things that I'm most proud of. And one of the producers at Tri-C is James Matteo, who is in Band of Brothers. He plays Frank
Bacante.
And he and moved to Cleveland years ago. So we've become friends with him. And so he's a producer on this. And when I submitted the script, he's like, oh, Kara, I love it. And he's like, but I don't see a part for me. And I'm like, hey, Jimmy, because he's got a very thick Bronx accent. And I'm like, can you do a British or a French accent? And he's like, no.
No.
And I was like, well, there you are.
There's not a lot of people from the Bronx in
At that point
South.
where we were telling the story,
So-
I was like, the Americans aren't here yet.
Yeah.
So we can't really do that.
Yeah,
I mean-
they're not on the continent in 1942.
We could have probably put him in there, but it's
They would,
question
yeah,
marks.
wow.
But so he's in the beginning of the film with no lines. Was our compromise.
So,
I'm gonna have to rewatch it now, knowing about the white scarf and some of the
Yeah.
other sides to it. I would say to anybody out there, it's the best 14 minutes you could spend. The idea of seeing something that I think feels so real and true and honors
Mhm.
the people who risked their lives during World War II in so many ways, without it being just a happy hero
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Not giving anything away. It's tense, and I think it celebrates so many people that did so many hard things, and there's no movies made about them.
Yeah, and I mean, what they went through was rough. Like reading stories about them, like, ugh, there's some horrible things that happened to them. But all the stuff that's in the film, when they're telling stories or the little snippets,
All was true.
all based on real women. No one in particular, but it's like kind of just an amalgamy of them as well. It's like just kind of
Yeah,
like with the
that's what I was thinking. So you amalgamated like different stories, but you didn't. It's not fiction per se. It's
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. And part of it being because it's part of a class, on our, I think it was our first day of filming, like that morning, before we kicked it off, I kind of gave the speech to the crew and the students about the seriousness of the subject.
You're doing
that we
real
were about
history.
to do. So that was kind of cool to be able to enlighten them on this part of history, and they were all like, that's really cool, I want to read more about it.
Yeah.
So I think
History wins.
just part of, yeah, it's part of, oh my gosh, the amount of times people on set, like I'll tell a story from history and they're like, that's pretty cool.
History
Yes.
wins.
But like just opening people's ideas or minds to seeing things that they don't necessarily get to see, and like that's kind of the purpose of why I fly, is like bringing more people into aviation and just being like getting that out there and letting people have access to that. So
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I can tell you it's absolutely fantastic, all of the work. Let's give a quick rundown of how people can find this. First of all, hemlockfilms.com is the home site where they can see the work under a title of the work and see all the different things. Many of them, yeah, an entire listing of that. Many other things you can see on PBS. So if you're interested in this, definitely do it. And some of them are viewable right there on the website, like the Resistance that we were just talking about. So before we go, what's next for both of you?
oh boy.
Like we said, we want to do another season of Why I Fly. And then we have a couple of larger projects. One is about a documentary about the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 missions. And then we also we have written and we're shopping right now a narrative version of the 1929 Women's Air Race.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Including another feature-length documentary that is not aviation related. What else? I feel like there's a lot of things on our plate that are potentially going to happen very soon. So.
And when there's multiple strikes in Hollywood, it gives us a lot of time to cook up a whole bunch of projects.
That's how we get in trouble.
That's how we get in trouble.
I
That's how we
think it's
get-
overflowing. Well, thank you both so much for taking time out of your evening to join us here on Social Flight Live. I'm grateful. Your work is absolutely amazing, and thank you. And I hope you get funding for all the things that you have planned.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
And
getting the
thank you
word
for
out.
having us. Yes.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you,
You
you too.
And to all of you, thank you so much for joining us again for another evening here on Social Flight Live. We'll be back next Tuesday, November 14th, going inside the Lockheed Skunk Works with Mr. J.B. Brown, who worked on the F-117 stealth fighter program at Lockheed in that famous Skunk Works. We're going to learn a lot about that. Then on Tuesday, November 21st, what's it like to fly NASA's Super Guppy? Well, the team from NASA that actually flies that aircraft will be here with us. Get to learn about that amazing aircraft, which we also saw out at AirVenture. Until next time, thank you all for everything that you do to support General Aviation, and I wish you all blue skies.